Hi, my name is Nikki. Welcome to my channel. I appreciate you being here. First off, if you've not been here before, I am a mental health guru. I have been through the gauntlet of mental health awareness and navigating difficult scenarios involving mental health and mental wellness. I am an optimist. I try my best to stay on the optimistic and positive side of things, given that sometimes depression can take over and other ailments are better felt when they are lifted. And just to introduce myself, I appreciate the fact that you are on board with some of the things and challenges that people go through. Second off, if you're here, you're likely here for a reason. I am navigating more than just mental health at this point. I also deal with a condition called neuropathy, and that is a physical pain associated with um, finding a metaphysical way of healing it. And these are things that I personally have on my road to recovery, the struggle that people go through. Some people, may seem like that they don't struggle, but they do. Everybody has challenges, and sometimes just having somebody bring that to our present moment is what we need. And I'm here to tackle some of these hard things, but also to introduce myself in general. One thing about myself that you should know is that I was mute for a lot of my life. I didn't really have a lot to say. I was very, very, very in my own world, shy, um, and this contributed very deeply to a very long um, I guess the best way to describe it would be it's been a slow burn, a lifetime slow burn from a mind fuck, and basically just feeling trapped in my own head and never really coming to the surface and discovering who I am. So as I unbox myself, I have spent a lot of really difficult years putting things in boxes. And what that I have discovered, I call this compartmentalizing. And by compartmentalizing, just exactly how it sounds, you have drawers and a desk and you put them in compartments. And this was very important for me. It was important for me to have my brain in order, although my home has never been in order. As you can see, there is still an issue of having my own personal space and belongings in order. And as I navigate through some of these challenges, I'm here to share it with you. I I go off the tracks all over the place. I am not afraid to explain something deeper where I find that there might be some sort of value. And whenever that I look back, it's important that I remind myself. And sometimes by sharing that with you helps me to reflect and say, damn, that was hard. Like some people, socially who have not gathered their pieces or have struggled or isolated, it is a process to redeveloping. And so I think that if I can display some of the true relationships with the world and discovering of self, that maybe I can help crack a few people open that really want to. Because, in a world of not being social, I mean, this is sex, this is relationships, this is challenges with, how do I do this? And you get trapped in your own head and you don't know, that once you get from A to B that you're good, but this doesn't always work with all people. Sometimes there is a one and a beginning and an end of one person, and because that's the only thing that's ever worked with maybe one person. And so navigating relationships is very difficult, and you kind of have to have a well-rounded, reality of how things work in order for this to change. And, taking real world scenarios from my life and sharing that is something that has always been deeply ingrained in myself. And so I just want to take a breath here for a minute and say, some of the new direction. I am quite overweight. I am 266 pounds. And I am I I'm struggling for mobility with the neuropathy and being so heavy that it's I'm starting to have a lot of um, need for self devotion. So this is also about what's the word? There's a particular word I'm searching for. Like self devotion, but like, see, these are some of the traps that some people live in. And, that just for example, like, some people, they smoke cannabis and they blame it on the weed. Oh, I must have smoked that weed. And, now I can't remember. And, um, but the thing is that it's in these compartments. And just as a live example of how that some people process and don't always have access to all the things that they need, it can cause, it's a deeper level of confusion because it's connected to our emotional system. Emotionally, if you're trying to meet somebody new or set a good impression, or do something that is new to you, you want to do a good job. You want to do a good job, and you learn how to deal with it. So what's the word I was looking for? Can I think of it? It's like that if the card, like if you haven't turned the card over, like you saw the card before, but now the card is the other way, but you have no way to turn it over. Can I turn this over? What is the word that I'm accountability? There. I know that's kind of accountability. So that's the word I was looking for. So as a way of being accountable, having a video diary and tracking my progress and being honest about who I am, I think is one of the most important things for other people who are discovering themselves. You don't want to deal with this sort of fakeness. Not fakeness, but maybe engineered, um, artificial sort of people in their state of being. And I say that because that's also something that I went through, is that, I just felt like every person was just so processed, and, like, I just felt like that there was a you know, really deeply rooted something wrong with me. Like I just it made me feel weird. Like I'm trying to, see a new, learn how to discover new things in the world, but I had just had this instinctual feeling that people were not being on the same, like I tried to be very genuine and it felt ingenuine to me. And so in any case, like this is just a short introduction of who I am. Um, so thinking about moving in the direction of having more physical movement within myself and sharing some of my goals and tracking some of my core values and the direction that I want to go, that there are some very difficult parts of change that almost feel impossible. Like it's hard for me to realize that I'm this person who always felt left out, isolated, hasn't been able to successfully socially involve myself, but does well independently. Like those are some of the things that have really shaped me as far as, where that I want to go from here. And so a lot of where that I am mentally is new. So as I've spent several very dedicated years to involving myself in how that, you know, I want to live my life, not that I didn't before, I just some of the definitions of what I wanted started to open up a little bit more. And so I'm hoping with that I can help some other people see that this is possible. Like there's and I'd say the number one thing, and I'd say this is the biggest thing that to consider, is your deepest drive is right. First off, your deepest drive is true. Validating what you want is the first choice that you have to surrender to. So what did I want to do? I wanted to help other people make it easier as a stepping stone to life and a safe space to let people be able to do this. And, you know, I have a professional voice like this, but I also have a really like crazy personality too. Like I like to dance and be goofy and say silly things. And, like I I would say in my life that I've never really attracted people very much that have helped me feel as if that I had a lot of self-value. And that's really hard because I never really had any self-value all all along. Like I never really felt um I dealt with not existing for a long time. Having this sort of like I'm just one person, I'm this little person type of mentality. And but what surpassed that is my drive to want to help other people see that they also can do what they strive to want to do. you may not realize that there is a place for you that is, like you take the steps to make the next step, and then it forms as you go based on what you want. And you just have to trust that. You have to trust that the choices that you're making are resonating or building upon themselves. And you don't have to have it all figured out at once. In fact, it's impossible to have it all figured out. You could have a list of all the things that you want to do. Sitting here, reading it to you. But you do have to make those steps. And, so let's go to the next step. I have made videos very sporadically, like over the last several years, on here, on OnlyFans, and on TikTok. And I used OnlyFans because I felt like that there was a lot to be understood about the human mind. And so I kept it on OnlyFans. I still have that OnlyFans. I do not post on that OnlyFans anymore. If I can be honest with you, I made a lot of videos that were like freestyling, like practicing. I made, I looked really stupid. I made the choice to say, I want myself to be seen in this raw form. And it's a hard choice to make whenever you've never had any self-value and you don't really feel as if that you have any support in what you're doing. To spend several years making videos very, putting yourself out there, and to never be monetized in several years, you have to have a strong sense of awareness to say, all right, I'm going to try this again. So taking all those loose ties and saying, how have I developed from there to here? So basically what I'm telling you is that I have failed 100% of the time until this point in my live streaming career. It seems tough to talk about, right? So just let that sink in a little bit. I do want to appreciate that you've come here to get to know me. Again, my name's Nikki, and I'm known as a friendly, easy person to talk to. I am weird. I make art. I make tie-dye. I make jewelry with macrame. So, can't really see it very well. Maybe something like this you can see better. Anyway, you get the idea. I do sell things like this. Here's my tower. I sell it locally, but I also have a website that's in my description. I'm here to be true, to be someone who isn't trying to, do anything but progress. Like, how does this work? You have to serve your audience, and you have to show, that there's some type of progress being made. And so this is another a stepping stone to what could come next. And like tutorials, there's a tutorial to my bracelets that are like this. And I do like things that are natural. I work with essential oils and things to make, because like these will absorb essential oils so that you can have a scent. So these can be Reiki infused, and also they hold the smell very nicely. So these are basically like wearable diffusers. And this is hemp. So this is a natural material. With time, it gets stronger. You can get it wet a little bit. You can get it wet, but it'll change it shrinks just a little bit. A lot of my items are custom. It takes a lot of time, but I do enjoy what I do. And so through time, I want to incorporate what you want, like, what do you want? Like, I may attempt to try to entertain again. I laugh at myself because I think that, it hits it hits a nerve, you know, uh, to spend your whole life not really feeling like that you have any support. And, I went through a period of time where I just felt insanely depressed and filled with anxiety. And, I just, I feel for you, like, I get it. Life's hard. And there's people that you can trust, and there's people that, try to make it a little bit brighter for you, that try to not bring your mind back to what was bothering you, staying up here and without feeling like it's artificial, feeling as if that you've made up your mind that you want to feel better and that you're not going to get in this low state, you know, letting you know to tell somebody. You can use services that are available. If you don't have friends, or you don't want to tell your friends, like, use the services available. There's local crisis numbers. You don't have to be like wanting to die to call some of these, places. They want to help. And, that's something that some people are able to deal with on their own. Some people are self-serving in what they need, but some people need someone to discuss like this, like, this is really bothering me and, not making sense to me. Can I call and tell somebody that isn't in my life, that doesn't involve me, that I can hang up the phone and feel like I have moved on from this particular, state of being. We, as individuals, need other humans. And that's also something that my channel is about. I do snuggle sessions with my 42-inch Peep, stuffed Peep. I snuggle with it on camera, and it's really important to know that we can rewire our brains to feel better. You know, if we can suggestively feel comfort as if another human in our own state, that is incredible. Use that. It's a tool. It's a tool. That you can resurface the way you feel and develop your own source of feeling love. Because what do humans want? Inclusion. They want to be loved. They want to be favored. They want to be heard. And if you're able to fill some of these voids, that's what you need. Is for this piece of information to be used in a way that brings you a a a tranquil peace. And I wish that to every one of you. I wish that more than anything to every person who's listening. It's just like grounding and breath work and taking the steps, knowing that you have a drive to do a certain thing, but how do you get there? Progressively. You take the steps to go a little further each time until you feel as if that you've reached a new reality. And sometimes you had to disconnect from everything. Maybe it was an argument. Maybe you had to go and just say, I need my own time. Maybe it was something unplanned. Maybe. And just know that we are all humans. That if you're in a place of traumatic feelings, you're just one person. And we have to have other people. We can do a lot on our own. And I think that sometimes that's the problem, is that we feel helpless to ourselves. And maybe take a time out. How much can you be responsible for in your emotions? And don't get overwhelmed. Don't get overwhelmed, because then nothing is obtainable. Don't get overwhelmed, and choose the next small step that works for you. If you're still watching this video, I thank you so much for following it to the end. I wish you tranquil thinking. Write down a few words for yourself. You know, tranquil journal, peace, snuggle, and redevelop what is home to you. How does home feel? What did home feel like? Just know that there's an old and a new, and you can develop something new within yourself. Even if it's just a tiny small step. I thank you again for listening, and have a wonderful day.